What up YouTube? It's Luca and welcome back to another video. So with Minecraft 1.20 just around the corner seemingly, it got me thinking. I was laying in bed one night just having random thoughts as you do, and then I started thinking about what kind of blocks I would want to be added to Minecraft in the future. So yeah, that's basically how the idea for this video was born. And as you have probably deduced from everything up to this point, I'm gonna talk about the top 5 blocks that I would want to be added in Minecraft. This list is not really ordered, though I will admit that the blocks do get a little bit more interesting as we go further up the list. So the first 2 blocks I think are mostly aesthetic, but the last 3 blocks actually have some kind of functionality to them. And yeah, let's not beat around the bush for too long. And let's get straight into it. And speaking of beating around the bush, that gets us nicely on to the number 5 block on this list. So let me start by asking you a question. Have you ever tried to build your own house in Minecraft? I know that I have. I've even on multiple occasions set out on a journey to build my entire neighborhood in Minecraft, but I always kind of just stopped before I got too far. And one thing that I always struggled with is how to make the hedges look. You know, in my neighborhood we have a lot of hedges. You know, ones that are just barely not as tall as a human. So I've always kind of struggled how to make those look good. And you can actually build hedges in Minecraft. So if you put this azalea bush down, you can place a moss block on top of it. And it actually joins together pretty well. And there you go. You have a solid hedge. But in my neighborhood we also have hedges that have like red leaves and aren't as tall. So you'd think you'd be able to use the same technique of placing this flowering azalea bush and then placing a full block on top of it. Except there is one problem. There is no full block for azalea bush. So that basically gets me on to the number 5, which is basically just like an azalea bush but a full block, just like the top half of this block without the stem, and then place the 2 on top of each other to create a full block that you can put on here and use to create a flowering hedge, whereas we've already got the standard hedge over here. So I think it'd be pretty easy to implement this, and I'm thinking that maybe you could craft this by putting 2 of the flowering azalea leaves on top of each other. You know, that way they kind of cancel the see-throughness and you'd be able to get 1 of this full azalea block. I think this would definitely be a huge upgrade because, you know, you can place a line of these things to create like a long hedge, but you know, it looks kind of bland. If we were able to incorporate some flowering hedges into the mix, I think that would be really nice for like nature builds. It's probably too late for it to be added in the 1.20 update, which is a shame because, you know, given everything else added in that update, it seems pretty nature focused. So it would be a good fit. But hey, maybe next update. Alright, so for our number 4 spot, I've taken to my Java single player world. This is where I've already made multiple videos showcasing how I built different castles. One on an ancient city and one in the end. So go check those videos out. But we're here now at one of my newest builds. This is basically a trading station for villagers that is really high up in the sky, almost at the build limit. And I like to call it Cloud City. And yeah, I mean, it looks pretty cool. We have a zombie over there. He's trapped. And yeah, I've used that zombie to basically like cure all of the villagers and make them sell rotten flesh for really cheap. And I've built it mostly out of like white blocks, quartz, stained glass, wool, even a little bit. But is there anything that seems off to you? Why the hell are diorite walls the only like white colored walls in the game? They don't really fit well with the rest of this build. So that's gonna be my number 4, or actually the number 4 is a shared spot, because I would like to add a quartz wall and then a quartz brick wall. I think those would be the best. Smooth quartz, I mean, smooth quartz is fine. As you can see, I used a lot of it in this build. Basically, all of this is smooth quartz. But I think this texture pasted on a wall would just look a little bit weird. So yeah, I think you could probably axe that one. But the normal quartz and the quartz bricks I think would make for great walls. It's just, like I said, I've been getting a little frustrated given that the diorite walls are the only white colored walls in the game. Now I don't hate diorite in the same way that many other players do, but yeah, I do think that it's not great. So yeah, I think this would also help improve like people who like to build like modern houses and stuff. I think this would definitely give an upgrade to them specifically, and then I can finally get rid of these walls in my own world. Okay, so for my number 3, this is where things are gonna get really interesting, because this is where we're gonna get into some of the wackier blocks that I have in mind. So I don't know if this is like a common feeling, but whenever I go explore ancient cities, I always think that the echo shards are a bit underwhelming. Like, you basically only use them to make the recovery compass, which in itself isn't really that useful unless you like die traveling far away. So I think it would be really cool to have another use for them. And based on that thought, I came up with kind of a wacky idea. I don't know if Mojang would actually implement something like this, but I think it would be really cool to have some kind of like shulker EMP that you can like place down, and then you can use probably echo shards to like charge them up, similar to like a respawn anchor. And then once it is fully charged up, it emits, like I said, like some kind of EMP, and then that blast would come paired with like a really high sound wave to basically stun them, you know, overstimulate them, and that would make them not be able to record you walking anymore. So any action that produces sound, they wouldn't be able to record for a short amount of time. And any warden within the area will probably also be stunned for a little bit. I think the range could be something like maybe a full-powered beacon. I mean, that's got, you know, not that big of a range. It's still pretty big, so you know, it might be a little bit less than a full-powered beacon. And the effect, I don't know how long it should last, maybe like half a minute or something like that. I don't want to make this too overpowered, but it's already kind of like expensive in and of itself. You know, you need like 4 echo shards, similar to a respawn anchor, like I said before, to charge it up. And you can't really farm these things, you can only find them in here. So it would be a pretty costly move to begin with. And as for what you need to craft this thing, I'm thinking maybe you put like a shrieker in the middle and then 8 amethyst shards around it. You know, as we know from the upcoming 1.20 update, amethyst is going to be kind of used to calibrate Skulk, turn it into something that's useful for you. So we've already seen it done in 1.20 with Skulk sensors. So I think this would be a nice way to do it to shriekers as well. Just turn them into a weapon for you by charging them with echo shards, and then it basically shrieks at such a high volume that all of the Skulk sensors and wardens in the area will be stunned. So at this point there's a lot of these like workstations in the game, right? These stations that make what you normally had to do by hand a lot more efficient. Like, they're all pretty useful except for one. And for my number 2 spot on this list, I'd like to add another one of these workstations, this one having everything to do with dye. Now that might sound like a stupid idea to some of you, but just hear me out. Alright, so you're probably all aware that if you want to make like orange dye, normally what you have to do is like create one red flower, turn that into red dye, and then get a yellow flower, turn that into yellow dye, and then you can basically mix them together in a crafting table. Well, I've always found that a bit tedious and taking way too long. So with this new like dye station, what you would be able to do is you would be able to put a poppy and a dandelion, like just the 2 flowers in here, and just get orange dye straight away. this station would basically allow you to just get dye instantly from flowers instead of turning them into dye first. And this would also work with like lapis. So if we would put lapis and a poppy in here, we would instantly get purple dye. And the same with bone meal, that would also then immediately count as white dye. And yeah, I think that would be really useful for people that work with colored blocks a lot. I don't really work with colored blocks all that much, but I know there's a lot of people that really enjoy them. And I think this workstation would be of good use to them. You might also be able to get like a new villager profession out of this. Maybe like the artist or something like that. That just sells you colored blocks and stuff like that. Maybe also some other things. As for what the workstation could be, I'm not really quite sure. I think it would be really cool to have it be like a mortar and pestle. And then the crafting recipe would probably be 5 blackstone in this shape to create, you know, kind of the bowl. And then a stone shovel in the middle to kind of be like the thing that grinds the flowers down to the dye. And yeah, I think it would just be a way to make this aspect of the game a little more efficient. Okay, so we're here in the Nether, and my final block on this list, the block that I would want to get added to Minecraft the most, is actually a blast from the past, because this block is actually already in the game, or at least it used to be. We're gonna talk about the Nether reactor core and how I'd bring it back in the Minecraft that we have today. So if you didn't know, the Nether reactor core was a block that was in Minecraft in the past. I believe it was only in Minecraft Pocket Edition, which was the Minecraft that you could play on your phone. The Nether reactor core was basically a block that was available in the early versions of Minecraft Pocket Edition, back before the Nether was implemented in that version, because the other versions already had the Nether, but it was still, you know, being developed for Pocket Edition. So basically the developers added in this block, the Nether reactor core, that you can also see in the thumbnail. And basically what you would have to do is you would have to place it down and then build a specific shrine around it and then activate it by left clicking on it. And if you then activate it, it would spawn a tower of netherrack around you, which was actually probably the only way to get netherrack in that version of the game. But once it was done, building that tower of netherrack and basically ensnaring you, it would spawn hostile pigmen that would attack you. So you'd have to fight off a couple of them, like a few waves. And then if you managed to defeat them and stay alive, then basically everywhere in the tower rare resources would spawn. You know, stuff like cactus that we now take for granted, but that used to be really quite rare in that version of the game. And then afterwards you'd just be left with a huge netherrack tower and a lot of resources. And that's basically all I remember from the Nether reactor core. I did play Minecraft Pocket Edition back when it was still in the game, but on the other hand I was also like 5 or 6 years old at the time, so it's quite a while ago. But yeah, I want to bring it back to now, today in Minecraft, except I kind of wanted to fit a different role, because if it was just brought back in its original state, then it wouldn't really be worth it. But what I want from the Nether reactor core is I would have it fill a very unique purpose in the Nether, because what I would want this thing to be is that I would basically want the Nether reactor core to be sort of a Nether version of the conduit from the overworld. So I'm fairly certain most people are familiar with the conduit in Minecraft. You know, it's a pretty rare item. You have to get the heart of the sea and the nautilus shells from the drowned before you can craft it. But once you've crafted it, you can place it down in water, surround it with prismarine in a pattern that is not similar to this at all. But once you've surrounded it with enough prismarine, it will basically give you superpowers underwater. You know, you're immune to drowning, you can see better, you can swim faster, I think. And yeah, if we were to bring back the Nether reactor core, I'd basically want it to be a Nether version of this thing. Of course, it wouldn't have the same powers, it would have different powers, because, you know, being immune to drowning is not really that useful in the nether. So yeah, throughout my talking I'm gonna be using like a monster spawner as kind of a placeholder for the nether reactor core. So every time you look at this, just imagine that the nether reactor core is there. I'm not sure whether or not you'd have to build like the shrine to this thing in lava. I think that would be a little impractical. So you know what, I think you'd just be able to build it anywhere in the nether, and I would have the player surround it with blocks in a similar fashion to the conduit, but of course the blocks would be different. And I think this is where we can give finally a use to a block that doesn't really have much use. I think to activate the nether reactor core, you'd have to surround it with gilded blackstone, which is a block that is decently rare. You can only find it in the Bastion remnants. But yeah, you would basically surround the nether reactor core with gilded blackstone in a similar manner that you would a conduit. There we go. I think that's right. So basically the same pattern, like I said, as a conduit, except with gilded blackstone instead of prismarine. And once you've built this, you will be able to gain the powers of the nether reactor core. But what exactly would those powers be? Of course, like I mentioned before, they can't really be the same powers as the conduit. That wouldn't make any sense. And this is honestly one that I'm still figuring out, like what powers should the nether reactor core give you if it's at full power. I've got some ideas. I think you should definitely be immune to fire, like fire resistance should be a part of this thing, just as water breathing is for the conduit. I also think it would be pretty cool that if you built this in a soul sand valley, that it would give you a limited amount of soul speed, like soul speed 2 or something like that. I don't really want it to give you soul speed 3, because that kind of takes away from the, exclusivity of that enchantment. And one other very interesting effect that I would want it to give you is that I would want this thing, if you're in its vicinity, to make you immune to the wither effect. I think that would be really cool, and I think that would also give people a reason to fight the wither in the nether. Usually the wither right now is only fought in the overworld, because there you can trap it underground, or you can fight it in the end where you can trap it under the portal that you can use to return home. But if this thing would make you completely immune to the wither effect, then I think that would give people some genuine merit to fight the wither in the nether. And as for how to craft this thing, I'm not even sure if you should be able to craft it. I think that maybe it should be like a rare drop from a Bastion remnant chest. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on that one. And honestly, the more I talk about this thing and the more I think about it, the more excited I am for the idea of what a nether conduit could bring to the game. And that's going to be it for my video on the top 5 blocks I want most in Minecraft. Definitely let me know if you found my ideas to be interesting down in the comments. Leave a like, subscribe, do whatever you deem fit if you want to support this video. And tell me your ideas in the comments. And like I mentioned before, tell me if you found my ideas interesting. I'm going to go now. I hope to see you all in a good mood in the next video. And goodbye everyone.